We recognise the Kaurna people as the custodians of the lands and waters of the Adelaide region and pay our respects to elders past and present. We acknowledge and respect the Kaurna people's cultural, spiritual, physical and emotional connection with their land, waters and community, and we extend that respect to all Aboriginal and First Nations people.
Most poor timing ever, and now we're recording, so it's even worse poor timing. But I am just going to really quickly pee, and then I'll be back.
Okay.
I should have done it while we were talking, but we were talking.
The fucking time.
Go head to the toilet.
Yeah.
AKA
the restroom.
The
wash bathroom.
Now this is recorded. We can say things like, Abby's off to do a fart. And welcome back to another.
And welcome back. No, that's not the energy we bring to After Dark. It's nighttime. Welcome back to Amy and After Dark.
Welcome back to Amy and.
Amy and nights.
I feel like Peyton should mention that Peyton is sipping so many shots right now.
She's pissed in her room with a cowboy hat on.
Now it's
At
two
the
shots
rave.
Peyton.
Yeah, I was about to say, shouldn't that be 2 shots Abby's?
2 shot
Yeah.
Abby. Abby 2 shot.
Welcome back to Amy and After Dark. This is our second ever Amy and After Dark episode. We're basically, but this time it's just and After Dark because we are Amy-less for while Amy is away on holiday, cavorting.
She's recreating the Wuthering Heights music video.
She's cavorting. She's doing any kind of non-work related activities, and we love this for her. But she did leave us homework to watch and talk about the film Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, which was a 1954 MGM like Hollywood musical.
Bless your beautiful heart, wherever you may be.
So yeah, we're going to get stuck into that this episode. If you tuned into our live last week, you'll know that we all sat in Amy's house and ate s'mores and watched this film together as our first ever movie night as a podcast group. Interesting choice for a first movie, but I have a lot to say about it.
Abby loved it. This was Abby's favorite movie. She loved the singing. I have footage of her reactions that I'm excited to share online.
Oh, do you actually? Because I didn't know that you recorded me.
I just go from the screen to you, and your face is always like this.
That's a little over £10.
How much is people worth this year?
$6 a pound.
Every time.
Which is
For our
Abby's happy face.
Yeah, for the audio For the audio.
For our audio listeners, I was pulling faces, and for context, I don't like musicals. Sorry, I
That's
apologize.
okay. We forgive you.
Thank you.
It's allowed.
It's not my thing. And so I haven't actually watched many of them. And watching this was certainly a trip.
Can we specify that your hate, well, not your hate, your dislike, your distaste, moves a little bit further when it comes to musicals where the songs are not introduced per se, but are more so just sporadic?
Yes, when the actors move straight from dialogue into the singing, and there's kind of no build up to the song.
Oh, yes.
It kind of turned a general frown from Abby into what could only be a look of disgust.
I feel like
he made a noise.
Yeah,
like
and hit his little next to me.
God.
Look, I like musicals when they are cartoons for kids.
That's fair.
And that's it for me. But I wasn't a musical theater kid, because the idea of being on a stage is actually the worst thing that could possibly happen to me. And like I don't know, I just never really got into any of it. But
You should watch
I was
Raise
an
Your
art
Voice
kid.
starring Hilary Duff. You might find it really inspiring.
Yeah, really
Yeah,
enlightening.
okay. Those are words that have simply never been uttered.
I watched High School Musical.
You watched the what?
High School Musical.
Oh, I thought you said the Rusical, and I was like, "You're a Drag Race fan."
Of all
Okay.
things.
Oh God.
I
I
love
have
Book
tickets
of Mormon
to Cats,
and
which
Mamma
I've been
Mia.
told is the worst
Oh,
possible musical I could watch for the
Cats.
first time.
It's
Yeah.
certainly
Yeah,
good.
just as someone who doesn't like musicals, it's an interesting
banger.
choice to
I'll
go and
report
see
back.
for your first live musical.
Yeah, I'd say it could be followed quickly by something like Stomp, which is
I think Abby would be like a huge fan of like Hades Town or like Six or something like
yes.
that.
Oh, Six is good. I love
Six
Six.
would be a good one for Abby, I think.
Yeah,
but
that
we're
would be a
not
good one.
talking about these musicals
No,
today.
no,
No, no, no.
apologies,
We're
I derailed
This
talking-
musical.
We're not talking lowbrow. We're talking
Oh,
upper
no.
echelons here.
We're talking up in the mountains.
We are indeed. Oh, Millie, 10 points.
Thank you. Thank you.
Look, I will contest because it is quite technically like lowbrow, especially in the context of it was released. It's like mass market entertainment.
It is massive.
Yeah.
And these Technicolor musicals were
It's the
seen.
Mills and Boons of musicals.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a negative
okay.
way. I mean that in like mass market, like Justina said,
Yeah.
like appealed to the masses. Like the main lead of the musical, like he was a stud in the, like all the women loved him in his prime. Like it's that kind of musical movie.
Yeah. Sometimes you think about just because a movie is old that it becomes like highbrow because people who are looking back to watch them are people who care deeply about like movies or movie musicals or things like that. But it is broad appeal, blockbuster hit type thing.
Yeah.
So it was directed by Stanley Donen, and it's Jean DePaul.
The music, yeah.
Yeah, the music is all
Jean
done by
de
Jean DePaul.
Paul.
And John
Yeah.
DePaul.
Should we
Yes,
give a
with Howard
very,
Keel
like-
and Jane Powell as the romantic leads.
Should we give a potted summary for anyone who hasn't watched it? Because I feel
Great
like
idea.
there might be a lot of people who haven't, but that's just my opinion. Most
no,
people
I
I've
do
spoken
think
to
it
since
is kind
have
of like-
seen it.
Especially people your age and my age, like it is a weird one. A lot of us wouldn't have seen movies, especially musicals from that age.
Yeah, from the 1950s. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Most of our listeners probably won't have seen it.
Yeah, I mean, I just
I would-
finished high school, I think, when I saw it. For the
So I
first
guess we are in a very particular niche. So I don't know. Having said that,
Yeah.
Let us know
yeah.
in the comments. Call in.
get in the comments. Let us know. Let's do a quick summary. Who
Or
would like
either
to do
read a quick synopsis or just off the dome. How do you remember this film going?
There are 7 brothers. They all have red hair and Bible names.
The first brother, Adam, goes into town from they live quite secluded, right? And they don't have a lot of experience with women whatsoever. And he goes into town looking for a wife. I think he says he wants a widow.
Yes.
And he very quickly marries Millie. And then all of the other brothers come into town to meet women and they all kidnap women and take them up to their little town, home and
Yep.
go on and so forth. I feel like I was the worst one and yet I was like, I'll do it.
All right. So he
Yeah.
marries Millie and he takes her up to the mountain, but she thinks she's just going to live with him. And
Yeah.
she's always wanted to be a wife and she loves the idea of the homestead.
And she
the
sings a
farm.
song about it.
And she sings a beautiful song about it. And then when she gets there, it turns out that he has all these brothers and she's realized that she's gone from taking care of all these men in town to having to cook and clean for all these men up there. But
Yes.
she knocks some sense into them. She gets them, she teaches them manners. She teaches them how to court. And she sings a great song about going courting. And then they all go to a barn raising. And then they sing and dance about doing the barn raising.
That
And all these brothers
barn?
meet all these girls. And there's a bit of a Shark and the Jets dance off about trying to win these girls. And what happens is they go back up to their mountain and the brothers are all very sad. And so Adam tells them this story that he'd heard, that he'd read out of one of Millie's books, I think is what he says, about men going to steal these women and how they married them, and it all turned out great in the end, and the women actually were so pleased to have been taken and married, and so they all go down the mountain. They grab the women and bring them up. Their plan is to marry them, but there's an avalanche, so the pass gets blocked, so all the women are stuck up there for spring. Long story short, of course, the girls, Millie like tries to keep the girls away from the boys, but they all end up falling in love, of course, while they're singing about spring and love. And so when the snow melts and all the dads and brothers and men of the town come up to save them, Millie's just recently had a baby. All the girls imply that the baby might be theirs to force their fathers to agree to let them marry all these brothers so that everything's proper. And so everyone's married in the end. And of course, it's all perfect and fine and everyone's in love. And Adam learns to respect women.
I don't think he does.
Great
No, does he?
I love this movie. I've watched this musical quite a few times.
That was terrific.
Now that you've heard the synopsis, be aware that we will be touching on topics of sexual violence and assault in this episode. So feel free to skip this one if you need to.
The musical's fun and singing and dancing and light. We're going to talk about some very serious topics because it is actually that deep.
Yeah.
So it's an adaptation of a short story called The Sobbin' Women, written in, was it 1937?
I had no idea until you mentioned it in their group chat.
Yeah. Adam sings the song about, he calls them the Sobbin' Women, but he's taken the story directly from...
It's Plutarch's account of the rape of the Sabine women, it's like a part of Roman myth, history, legend.
But the story Seven Brides for Seven Brothers is based on this short story.
Yeah. And the short story was a retelling of that in this 1850s Oregon context. I'll admit, I had not only not watched this movie before now, I hadn't heard that it existed. And I do like musicals. And I sort of went down a rabbit hole looking into what all the context of this was. And a friend of mine, Gemma Neal, spent 2 hours on the phone to me the other night, actually giving me a crash course in the context of sexual violence in ancient Roman literature and history.
She's a classicist and she makes incredible zines.
She's a classicist and incredible artist, and was very delighted that I'm finally asking her questions about Ovid. So yeah, apologies to Gemma specifically if I misremember anything she told me. I did also do some of my own reading, but yeah, reading that short story after seeing the film and after doing a little bit of reading into the differing accounts of the rape of the Sabine women made my mind explode.
Yeah, I've been interested because I have read the short story before because I love the movie, and I looked it up like, what was this guy talking about? And then found the short story and was like, oh, that's wild. I would love to talk about the difference. So in the short story, spoilers for anyone who hasn't read it, 1937. So Millie, the romantic lead, has a very solid position in the short story of helping the men to trick the women.
Yes, I was going to say,
of
she's
stealing, organizing
complicit.
the stealing, but also convincing the women once they are trapped there to fall in love and marry these brothers.
She's very manipulative.
Almost, I would say, the key architect in the plan.
It's
which
like
she
a whole...
is not in the movie.
No. It's like a whole reverse psychology thing in the short story. She brings them up and she's like, no, you can't see the men, but she's doing it to increase their curiosity about them.
Yeah.
And then when it's all working, she's like, oh no, you can't be interested in the men.
You know what's really interesting is that I remember, because I've seen the movie a handful of times with my grandfather back in the day. I hadn't read the story until you'd sent it to us, Justina, but I had known that it was based on a short story. But when the movie came out, it was a box office smash.
And it won Academy Awards.
Yeah.
It was a huge success. But one of the main criticisms was that they believed that Jane Powell was weak and colorless and had no energy as the character of Millie. And so it's really interesting thinking about the change from the short story to the film and how a major critique was about her role in the movie.
Yeah. I think some of the early criticism of this film, I mean, a lot of it is very glowing reviews based on the a really iconic dance scene at the barn raising and the way that Michael Kidd, the choreographer, incorporated
chopping wood and stuff.
into dance movements. But yeah, it's just fascinating considering like this is the 1950s that this film was made. This is in a post-war era. This is also in an era of a lot of myth making around national identity for a lot of different countries, but also specifically I feel like for the US in terms of viewing themselves as an empire. And you see ancient Rome and the Roman Empire being invoked in film in a way that has very interesting links to the notion of empire.
Yeah, it's
and
like
at
an
the same time,
aspirational type thing. They're brought up as something to look up to.
The other thing that's interesting is that like musicals at this time were seen as just fluff, just like sentimental fluff. People didn't take it seriously. There's a lot of mirroring of the way the romance genre is treated, which I find super interesting. Also, because a lot of these musicals were romances.
Were romance, yeah.
Like,
I was gonna say,
were romantic comedies.
Yeah.
So they faced a lot of the same like complete disregard from critical analysis throughout the early 20th century. And it wasn't until around the 70s that people started actually looking at it with a critical lens. Which is interesting because there's so much stuff in this. Yeah.
Do you think that the story was meant to be a more critical point of view of this kidnapping thing and homemaking thing, and then the movie, by disempowering the main character so much to the point where she's just like maybe kind of passive and maybe just lets these things happen, but she's not orchestrating the kidnapping or anything?
Well, I think for the movie they had to make her a sympathetic character, right? Like in the short story, you read it. Not that I think that he was trying to make anyone a sympathetic or unsympathetic character, but you couldn't make it one for one into that musical because she becomes. I think if you try to do that in a musical, she immediately becomes the villain.
This is also the era of the production code, so there are rules around what can morally be included on screen, and part of what makes the plot of this film like permissible is the fact that she's so disapproving of everything. And I think the short story, it's not necessarily trying to be I did warn you all that I would bring up colonialism. I think it's being critical of colonialism rather than specifically being concerned necessarily with gender dynamics, but this might be my frame of thinking.
I think that's what because especially when that connected in my brain when you're talking about the fact that the movie came out in the 1950s when there was this real return to, you know, what we now know as like trad wife stuff. So the changes totally changed the flavor of the story.
I read a couple papers before going into this, and they were talking about the context of the film and how it was, because it was a 1950s film and it was that post-war film. There was a lot of movement post-war where during the war period, women had gained a lot more independence. And there was this movement post-war with a lot of their like television and movies and media of trying to create narratives in which women were back to that kind of serving men, subservient kind of way of living. I'll have to put the actual paper somewhere because they were talking about how the gender in this, how in the kidnapping and in Millie's resistance and like disapproval of the kidnapping, and how there is no explicit rape at all in the musical, and the women all shut out the men until they slowly grow their affections. In doing that, supposedly the musical was trying to speak to patriarchy, but I don't fully agree with that because in the end it kind of just circles back to these women still marrying these men that kidnap.
Yeah, the men still get rewarded for kidnapping. Yeah.
When I first watched it without any context, I remember my first thought being like, well, that was the most like misogynistic thing I've ever seen. In some ways, it's like so comically contrived that it's almost like the performance of this like need for marriage to be like respectable, despite the fact that seconds ago these men were willing to kill the brothers. And then as soon as the idea that one of their daughters, and they don't know which one, could not be a virgin, they're like, well, now they all have to get married.
And also like the whole kidnapping scene is, even though it's boiled down and it's kind of like run over with this comedic lens and this like very like slapstick style comedy almost, it's pretty haunting to think that that's actually what happens. Like they come in the dead of night and they kidnap these women from their families, hoist them away, cover their mouths, you know, like
it does feel like it doesn't stand up today.
No.
So you know,
but it also feels like almost by sanitizing it to make it a little bit better. You know, it's okay because they didn't rape them. by sanitizing it, you've actually taken away, you've filed down the story's teeth a little bit.
I think this specific story is one about empire and about the foundation of empire. And the short story, again, I'd never heard of the short story. I'd never heard of this writer, but he was a Pulitzer Prize winning writer. Like, I mean, this research was based on Wikipedia because I was like, who's this man? I don't know this man. But yeah, the Pulitzer makes me think there's this prestige attached to him. So I wonder if part of this is like an attempt to legitimize Hollywood films as an art form and the Hollywood feature film as an art form by reaching to theater and the classics and this adaptation to be like, no, we're serious. But also this is such a silly musical and it is a comedy. But it's just like the rape of the Sabine women is like, yeah, it's... Sorry. Now, my mind has like too many things in it.
You've got so many things you're trying to remember. It was because the Sabines wouldn't let their women marry Romans because they were worried about the emergence of of rival societies. We know what happened with the Romans and how they were, and they wouldn't let their women marry Romans.
Yeah. There are conflicting accounts from different writers and also conflicting interpretations of those accounts. The film specifically mentions Plutarch, but that's not in the story. They don't mention Plutarch. I read a few different interpretations of the different writers' accounts of it. And one of the main ones is not so much Plutarch, but Livy and Ovid, who have very different accounts. It's interesting because the reasoning or motivation for it is slightly different in the different accounts. And then there's different opinions on why that is. Part of it is like, this is the early days of Rome. In some accounts, there's a biological imperative. I think that might be in Livy's. They have a lot of men, they have a lot of military strength, but they don't have women. That is a threat to empire now that there's like no longevity to it. To secure the future of their nation or of their statehood, they need women. Some writers write of it more as you say, Millie, like a political motivation for allying through marriage to neighboring nations. And then Ovid's very different as well. And I think it's really interesting to think of in the context of this film because his account is very bawdy, very sexual. And it's almost like the tone, or I'm told by people who actually can understand Latin, is almost like humorous in a way that rubs people the wrong way. A lot of critics of Ovid's account say that he's like not taking this event seriously, but he's also the only one who gives the motivation of like lust to the rape of the women. And some accounts, some of them try to downplay the assault of it and the violence of it and try to make it more about like a logical convincing that this is a thing that they want.
Yeah. To be honest, that account of lust seems like I would probably lend the most credence to it. I'm sure it's probably one of those things where it's like, it's a little bit of everything, maybe. But the fact that we can see in more recent colonial history that often women are just given to men to satisfy them sexually, and that's pretty much
I was going to say, this is so interesting. What an interesting time. So for our listeners, we have a queer theory reading group where we read queer theory, shockingly. And just this week, we had a fascinating conversation about Braveheart, the movie, and talking about, I'm going to forget what it's called again, the prima nocta. Was that what it was called? The law where basically English men were allowed to sleep with, is the very generous term, the new wives of Scottish men on the night of their wedding. And the thought was like, obviously that is so steeped in power, but also the thought was that the women would then bear English sons as opposed to Scottish sons. And so we were talking about the fact that it all comes back to colonialism, but always that women are the tools used in colonialism, and sexual violence against women historically has been political, has been used politically, especially when it comes to warring nations or empires taking over other,
Something that we'll talk about next month, we analyze a couple articles. There's the Shu Ming Tao article in particular that I'm thinking of. There's a bit of information about Australian colonial history in that, and you learn about how women were brought over basically to be sex workers, or a lot of sex workers were brought over not for their crimes, but because they would satisfy the men. And then, of course, there is naturally, as we've got here with two warring nations in our context, that would be the white settlers versus all the Indigenous peoples here. And the Indigenous women suffered greatly at the hands of this same kind of thing, just taking the women, and men feeling entitled to it. Like they should get their satisfaction somehow.
And historically, right, like when somebody colonizes somebody else, the men are like, well, we are entitled to the women of this place now.
Yeah. What do we think then is behind why this short story takes this part of history and puts it into the 19th century?
Well, sorry, I'm taking so long to get to the context because there's so many different versions of it.
We've got time.
In some versions of it, what happens is Romulus is like, all right, we're going to throw a huge party and we're going to lure all our neighbors in for this party. And then I'll give a signal. And then all my men will like grab women to essentially rape or force into marriage to kidnap, etc. In some accounts, he gives a big speech to the women and essentially pitches the idea of marrying them to them. And they're like, yeah, whatever, sounds neat.
Convenient.
And there's this...
Yeah.
Some do specify that they're all virgins, except for one married woman who is...
Oh, that's right. I forgot about this.
She becomes Romulus's wife. But yeah, her name is Hercilia. And one thing about Hercilia is that in especially Livy's account, she acts as an intermediary between Romulus, the leader of the Romans, and the Sabine women. So she's often trying to like convince him of things and talk to them, and like she's this intermediary between them. The other important part of the story is when the families of these girls come to get them and they have a war, and the women themselves stop the war by coming between the fighting. Again, this differs. In some accounts, it's Romulus's idea for them to do this. It's Romulus who stops the war. In some accounts, it's the women themselves, and their motivations are different. In Plutarch's account, there's a lot more anger in it. There's a line, they essentially are like, you'll make us war prisoners twice over if you do this. They're both reprimanding their families for letting this happen to them, and at the same time saying, we now have families here, you're just doing it again.
Right.
In Livy's version, in the middle of the fighting, they like throw themselves in the middle of combat. They convince them to stop fighting by appealing to the fact that these men are now their husbands. Personally, when I read the line from Livy's version, I was like, Jesus. But
Hachi machi.
They throw themselves in the midst of it all, and they like say stop, because they love their husbands and families now.
Right.
And it's just like, it's really interesting to me because I feel like what this short story does, and the thing that made me like lose my mind, was that in some ways it's like patriarchy bait, because you start off following the brothers and the eldest of the brothers, and then at some point it becomes all about Millie. And when Millie suggests to them that they just kidnap the women, that's when I realized that Millie is Romulus. And then as you keep going, Millie's not just Romulus, Millie is also Hercilia.
Yeah.
And she's also, I think, the way she orchestrates everything, she's also the author of it all. She's also Plutarch, Ovid, and Livy. She's crafting a narrative. She's crafting a story. And she's wielding power in a way that I find really fascinating.
You know what it keeps making me think of, and I'm sorry if this is a bit of a leap, but her character, especially in the short story, like I wasn't thinking of this as much in the movie, and it probably doesn't apply so much in the movie because they are quite different. It makes me think so much about sex trafficking and how you have people like Ghislaine Maxwell, and then you also have people who aren't as powerful as her, but the way that sex trafficking victims will then be used to lure in more victims for the promise of their relative safety by kind of, giving that to someone else and feeding into the system a bit. And she seems like a Ghislaine Maxwell in the short story. I found it quite jarring. I was like, oh my God.
It was weird though, because when I realized that this was what it was based on, and that I wasn't just reading something that Justina was fascinated with. I quickly
Which we would do.
Yeah, well, and I have done many a time. It wasn't until I started the thing that I thought, this is oddly familiar. And then, oh, hang on, that's what we're talking about. But I agree. I think it is jarring because that's such a contrast to the adaptation from the short story. She's so different.
And she's so different.
She's so different. What I wonder, though, is that had she been portrayed as she is in The Sovereign Women, in the adaptation in the musical, would there have been more?
It never would have.
Oh, you just couldn't,
made.
right? Like, you just couldn't,
Yeah.
Because it couldn't be a silly, goofy musical if she was, because like I said, she becomes a villain at that point. Like, it's actually quite heinous what she does.
And
you just couldn't put that in a musical.
She's so true. I mean, from the moment that she says that she's pregnant, that she can't do it anymore, and that it means that they need more people. You're right. Again, I would say Ghislaine Maxwell, because it's an instant shift.
Because the other
as a
The
character.
other thing that is different in the story is that they don't run into town and like comically kidnap each woman individually.
They go one by one.
They go to a annual celebration in the town that is specifically one where people aren't supposed to have weapons or be armed. And then she gives the signal. Again, it's Millie who is Romulus. She is the founder of Rome and this empire, who gives the signal for them to take the women. And everything happens so smoothly in the short story because Millie is so in control of every single thing. She has thought of everything. We know almost nothing about her from before she meets these brothers. As soon as things become to be more about her, they almost don't appear. Like her husband basically isn't in the story.
They're very passive
the
characters.
halfway point.
Very true.
And
they for minute details, you're right, because she talks about the dust on the windowsill.
Yeah. And they hold the townspeople up with gunpoint.
Yeah.
And they literally rob them of their women and then lock them in the barn and leave. So they don't even, there's no chase, there's no close calls because it's all been accounted for.
And because the short story isn't a romance and the men in it are so passive, the couple, they don't even have any of the conflicts that they do in the movie. Like in the movie, she struggles so much to adjust to this new lifestyle and they really don't see eye to eye because he's such a patriarchal figure. And
and you're right. And the men are also very they're disrespectful and they act like animals in the film. Regarding
in
her
the book,
however,
they're like, I keep saying the book, the short story.
But in the short story,
in the written version,
explicitly stated that they treated it respectfully and that they dined on the food and that they appreciated the work that was done.
They felt so bad for her that she was working herself to the bone. And
that's the other thing that I find super interesting is that it's doing those things that Amy says that is the strength of Westerns. It's foregrounding things like women's labor. Because one of the interesting moments that is similar to what happens in the film, but the tone is totally different, is when Harry, which is the name of the older brother in the story, approaches Millie while she's working, and he's that version of the like inarticulate vulnerability. Like he is not this cocky asshole who expects that someone's just going to say yes to him. He's quite stressed out by this whole interaction, and he's trying to chat her up, and he's like, "Oh, it's a nice day," and she's like, "For some," which is this implication of she's almost depicted as not quite working class. I feel like I don't have enough context for this exact time in history because she is
briefly say that in the story she was a bound woman, which is like an indentured servant.
But then also not as bad as who she was living next to or alongside.
Well,
this is it was like, oh, it's a step above like
an enslaved
slavery.
person.
She's not a slave. Don't worry.
But it's still, even the fact that it mentions that line is still, it's really interesting context. And then
relatively, she's still got quite like not much power at all. She's just lucky that she happens to have a bit of an education and is now like a criminal mastermind in the way to climb to the top of the ladder.
With a gang behind her.
She immediately, upon agreeing to marry him, immediately starts manipulating him in a way that
buying the dresses and the shoes and everything.
He buys her a bunch of stuff. He's like so bewildered. And in the musical, her not knowing that he has brothers is a deliberate manipulation on his part. In the story, he genuinely was just like, "Oh, I didn't even think of that," and it's like, no, you believe it. He genuinely didn't even think to mention it.
It's so interesting how the short story, if I'm just thinking politically, like I'm not saying I dislike the musical, and obviously we're speaking about it very critically here, but that's just because we're on this podcast. But in some ways, the short story resonates with me more today than the musical. Like I think it actually speaks to a lot of current issues quite poignantly. And I think the fact that that was published and then it was adapted is just further proof, if we ever needed any, that progress is not linear. Like someone was able to make this very wise critique of colonialism and also how gender relations are wrapped up in colonialism and how white women aren't necessarily victims all the time.
And then there's other things. There's other ambiguities in there as well. So there's the religious aspect of it. So they don't wait for the minister to get married. They get married by a hedge parson, which I don't know what that would be.
I believe it's a traveling person with the rights.
So they don't get married by the minister, and it's interesting that the minister's daughter in the story is the first one to kind of crack and to be like, "Oh, what about these men? Wouldn't it be nice to get married to them?" And the minister is leading the pack of townspeople to get the women back.
Yeah.
So I find there's something in there, I think, about where religion sits in this frontier colony. And this is where I feel like maybe I'm reading too much into it. I would need to read more either criticism of the story or more about this author's political writings
or you could adapt it again and then you can put all of it in there.
This is going to be my comment, right? Because I read a Reddit thread, as one does, where someone was saying, hey, if we were to adapt this, like they were interested in a modern adaptation of the musical, how do I adapt it without the kidnapping and that sort of thing? And most of the consensus was that you can't adapt it without that because that's the core of the story. And I have come into this conversation not having read the short story and not knowing a lot about the like historical context behind it. And it's really interesting knowing all of that historical context and saying you actually cannot remove that from this. So what would a modern adaptation look like?
Yeah, you just change the response to it. Like you would leave it in there, but it would actually be bad in text. It would
be more of a horror film than a silly, goofy musical.
Yeah, imagine that though. A man outside your house pretending to be your cat. That is
my understanding. They did adapt it to the stage.
Right. Yeah, they adapted they adapted the movie musical to be a stage performance.
To a Broadway show, wasn't it? Yeah.
And then it's been adapted to TV shows and things as well.
Yeah, and it's had a Bollywood adaptation, tons of changes. Tons of variations, should I say. There was 2 TV shows I remember because there was a TV show that was a lot later.
Beyond adaptations.
But this is the other thing is that in the story, like in the film, the men are all ginger. In the book, they're described as being dark-haired, dark-featured, and they're actually the author invokes the image of Native Indian without explicitly saying that
I was wondering that.
Yes, because they're called the Pontypees in the short story.
Yeah.
And in my research binge, I'll try to link as much of this stuff as possible.
But I put it in the YouTube description, I guess.
I don't think we've ever said that. If you go into the description, the links are there. Link in the description.
So I listened to a lecture by Dr. David Lewis, who is a tribal historian for the Confederated Tribes of the Great Ronde Community. And it was a lecture he did for the Oregon Historical Society as part of their Oregon History 101 lecture series. It's all available on their website. You can watch it. It's great for an overview of the changing dynamics around this colonial history and the ongoing colonial history there. He talked about the role of missionaries and this assimilationist approach to colonizing Indigenous peoples there and how they were trying to, quote unquote, educate them essentially into becoming, I actually wrote the quote down from this lecture. That was US policy for a real long time. They wanted to eliminate the Indian culture and they wanted to save the person and turn them into basically a white American. But it has a lot of resonances with the way that Indigenous peoples were treated in Australia. It's like in this frontier period, that idea of the necessity for bodies and for labor and wanting to exploit the labor and skills and bodies of Indigenous peoples while trying to eradicate their culture. And like it was a express mission of the church he brings up a specific missionary, Jason Lee's Methodist mission, to entice white women to Oregon because he was worried about how many settlers were marrying Indigenous people.
Right. Okay.
So I find, again, this is where I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm reading this into it because of just the way that my brain is wired.
I've connected the dots.
Yeah, I've just connected it too. I'm like, okay. Now I'm getting all of this now.
Millie's style of colonialism is very assimilationist in a way. She is trying to make people change what they think to be what she thinks. And she weaponizes every power that is available to her in at first quite subtle ways, but eventually characters who at first she won't communicate, she will wait until they do what she wants. By the end of it, they just follow her orders. They just ask her what they're doing, what's happening. They just see her as an ultimate authority. And she gets there without them ever noticing that that's what she's doing, which is, it's really insidious. So my reading of this short story is that it's a specific critique of white colonialism, of the way it weaponizes religion, weaponizes education, and attempts to assimilate any like aberrant I suppose, identity into their own. And the film can't be that, because the film's goal was almost the opposite of that.
Yeah, I agree. A far lighter, far less serious take on what is actually a very troubling and very deep short story.
Remember when we talked about doing karaoke for this episode?
Your beautiful heart. I can't remember the lyrics.
Just before I was like, I wonder what this comes from.
What's the one where, isn't it these sobbing women?
And the women were sobbing.
And the women were sobbing. Yeah. Oh, Jesus Christ. I remember that one. When he swings out of the grocery store or something and he says a couple lines to the people he passes and then he opens up straight into song. I do distinctly remember Abby going,
yeah.
And then
it's like one of their asses was too flat and the other one had too much of an ass, you know.
Yeah.
And then Amy's
like Goldilocks with the
Amy had to continually remind me that this is not a nice guy.
Yeah.
He has to learn to respect women, which he will only do when he has a daughter.
What I found, because I kept relating it back to my research and talking about all of this context, and also, Justina, I must know, I love how much research you put into this. Like you watched a lecture, which this is like a really good, if you're listening to this episode or watching this episode, it's a really good leadway into Academia Month next month where we talk quite critically about these sort of things. But I kept comparing it to, like, this was a 1950s musical and we're now in the 2020s. The romances that are really, really popular do have kidnapping of women still, in which the women end up marrying said kidnapper, which I found really interesting that, like, that is still the romance today.
This is where I find the classics link really interesting, because these are like the myths that a lot of Western storytelling are based in, and the replication of those myths and the way those myths are utilized. So the other thing that my friend Gemma mentioned to me is that there are sort of 3 sexual assaults or like rapes of women that are key to the foundation myths around Rome. One is the rape of the Sabine women. One is the rape of Rhea Silvia, who is Romulus and Remus's mother, and she was raped by the god Mars, god of warfare. And the other thing that's very significant about that is that she was a Vestal Virgin, which I'm told means she was essentially seen as a personification of Rome. There's a lot of tension between Mars and Venus in these foundational myths, where the founding of Rome is founded on the assaults of women. And this tension between Mars, who is a god of warfare and violence, and Venus, a god of love, and not just love, but specifically like a sexual kind of love. And I was like, that is so fascinating, that the foundation of empire, of the foundation of the empire myth that so much empire myth making is based on, ancient Rome, is one that is founded in the exploitation and assault of women and that mix between sexual violence. So fascinating. Anyway,
I feel like we're like I know that meme is very funny, but I think we are actually connecting the dots.
Oh, I actually
Justina
agree.
brought us the dots and went, "Hey guys, here are the lines," and we went, "Yes,
Yes, this is actually checking out.
I'm thinking back to one of the stories you were telling before, how there were all these different takes on the rape of the Sabine women. And in one of them, they were eventually quite happy with their situation. They'd formed relationships with their husbands and their children and everything like that. And then, Abby, that's basically what happens that's what the whole romance novel is in when those dynamics are portrayed in romance novels, is them finding contentment in that situation eventually.
Exactly. I hate to cut us off because we are cooking right now. But I think I think we're about to hit an hour. So does somebody want to make like a last point, maybe?
This is so not related to any of the really important conversation we've just had, but something that I noted in the musical that I really wanted to mention, which you guys can comment on or not, is
there's a lot of singing.
No, not singing. My mother is a huge fan of this, and like my brother is named after one of the brothers in this, and there are always people who say which brother is their favorite. None of the characters in this have personality.
Yeah,
like how can you? I couldn't tell the brothers apart, and then I was like, "What's your favorite brother?" But why?
Yeah.
What's his personality? He doesn't have one.
I'm just.
I feel like Benjamin is kind of the only one you can pick out because
Benjamin had no personality whatsoever.
or Benjamin or Frank, and Frank has personality because don't call me Frank and say
his personality is
and that's it.
fight you.
Yeah. And so
Abby,
I found
I'm
it really
disappointed.
fascinating how attached
sorry.
people got when they had no personality. Sorry, Peyton.
Go, Peyton, go.
I was just gonna say I'm disappointed that your mum didn't call you Dorcas.
Yeah, Dorcas.
yes.
Right, we loved Dorcas.
Then you'd
Oh
be
my
Dorcas
gosh,
2 shots.
Dorcas.
Dorcas was a hoot.
No, I'm glad.
Pop down
I
the drinks,
wasn't
Peyton.
Oh my God, you'd be good Dorcas
The Dorcas
guy.
joke.
Dorcas guy. Oh
Ooh.
my gosh. Well, my brother's
Oh.
name is Benjamin, so calling me Dorcas would have been really strange.
Oh yeah.
Benjamin
Oh,
and
That's true,
Dorcas.
because they pair up. That's
Yeah,
true.
actually that
They're
Yeah.
a couple, yeah.
All right,
Never mind.
all right.
And
But-
when we're sobbing.
the only question that I had for this episode before I went on like just a absolute research spiral last night was if the McBrides had to do a dance battle at a barn raising, how do you think they'd go?
Bo
Oh my
would
It's a
God.
kill it.
fantastic
I
question.
would-
to end on.
At the dancing or the barn raising?
It's
So
a
would
barn
Jonah.
raising dance battle.
Okay.
Morgan would
Barn
be
raising
pissed off
off.
by all of
Who
the
are they-
destruction. He'd be
who are
like,
they
all of you
battling?
need to
Yeah,
stop.
no, but the point is that they do it as a team. Who would they be?
Are they
dancing
battling like the
against?
miners?
I don't know. I was
No,
just
they're
like,
they're
imagine
Battling
Don't
like
think
Roy
about
and
that.
and Bill and stuff.
Like
I never
Sour
thought
Eagle?
that far. I just thought it would be so funny watching Kit and Morgan try to dance.
Yeah.
Yes. They would be great at the barn raising, and like Bo and Junebug would have to really carry with the dancing.
Oh,
There's-
yeah.
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 I
Actually, no.
love-
Morgan dances with Junebug a lot, so actually maybe they would have
Oh,
been
that's
fine.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
I feel like
reckon,
actually what would happen is
Pips-
that Junebug would like line them up and be like, "All right, it's time for like boot camp for dance."
Yeah,
And she
let's
would
do
teach them
this.
how to dance.
They're learning the choreo. And
I
she's
feel
getting
like the
quite upset
reason-
if they don't do it right.
I feel like the reason the barn falls would somehow would not be a brawl, right? But would have to somehow be something that Junebug has done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
Gee.
Morgan would like tell her to rebuild the barn or something,
Yeah.
and then late at night he
Yeah.
would just do it himself.
And she'd be like, "I'm not going to build that barn. I'm going to order a wife to help me build that barn."
Multiple wives to
I
build
would-
Multiple wives to
barns.
build the barn.
I would kill to be in a community though where I can gather a couple people around and give them an animal as payment and maybe a couple drinks, and they build me a house in a day.
Yeah.
That's all I wanna know.
Yep.
It's like seriously.
Yep.
Come on. What happened to that?
We
What
used to
happened
be a
barn
society.
building parties? I personally would not be attending them. If either of
Maybe
you
we
said-
should go back to traditional.
Traditional
yeah.
values.
Let's go back there. I'm sure we'll all do really well in that system.
All of us,
Yeah.
Yeah,
without
us
Amy
specifically.
here, we're all becoming trad wives.
I know
we
we're
need
trying to
Amy
wrap
to
up,
return to protect us.
I know we're trying to wrap up, but I saw a thing which was like, "Oh, you're suddenly dropped into the world of the last book you read. Like, how are you going to do? Are you going to survive?" And I was like, for me, it was like, I think I will, because again, the last book I read was Bo, but I think I would survive, but not because I would survive well in like a Western, Montana, like historical frontier Montana, but because it's a romance. And like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna
That's
be
right.
all
You're
right.
guaranteed
Like,
to survive. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna be okay.
Definitely.
I would struggle in Middle Earth, I feel.
Yeah.
You were just there and you survived. So I reckon you're
Very
all right.
true.
Oh,
Very
yeah.
true. Actually, yeah. Quite astute, Peyton.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's me.
For those
Anyway.
listening at home, yes, we do mean literally. Harry did travel into the world of Lord of the Rings.
I
Yeah,
actually did. Yeah.
It's an
Into the
ability of his
portal.
we're all jealous of.
yeah.
But yeah, we should wrap it up.
I suppose.
We
Thank
should.
you so much.
Luckily, we can edit this, so if it is too long,
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll edit out all the
It's okay.
No
quotes,
editing needed.
stared into space, rifling through my mind palace of quotes.
This was fucking.
That I
You know
could-
how nice this was, though, Justina? I was sitting here and I was like, oh, I'm on a podcast. I should probably.
I could
stop."
keep going. Like I
I-
genuinely.
I was happy just to listen.
I
to
was
you
just
talk about
listening.
it.
Yes.
It was so fascinating.
I miss
I know, we're gonna stop
attending
interrupting.
lectures.
Justina trying to wrap up the episode.
Yeah.
I know,
Yeah.
especially
Sorry.
because I'm so easy to get tangent on things.
Literally, actually, I think I could do it right now if I asked about what color the audio
That's
was.
it.
or where they
Everybody
wanted
but
from.
Justina mute themselves.
Justina,
No.
wrap
Thank
up.
you, thank you everyone for coming to Amy and After Dark episode 2. I hope you enjoyed this light-hearted discussion of a silly 50s technicolour musical where everything was silly and fun and all we did was jokes.
Do you think Amy
Thing.
expected it to get this serious? I think she thought it would just be
Yes.
fun. Oh, okay.
No, I thought
Oh.
she absolutely did. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
for
so.
sure.
I mean, she has both taught us and supervises all of us. She knows what we're like.
That's right.
True.
She knows how we feel about masculinity.
I know. I feel
Anyway,
like I barely got to
bye.
talk about the gender of it all because, God, it's fascinating. Anyway,
It's a perfect leeway into next month.
Yeah.
Agreed.
That's right. That's right.
Agreed.
It's just going to be a
Um,
whole month of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Don't
we'll
let that
see you
discourage you.
then.
It's very accessible.
It's very
Yeah,
simple and
yeah.
very fun. So
We just
fun.
pretend to know things, guys. Seriously.
That's all academia is.
Millie sends us
Alright.
cue cards. We just read off them.
Like right
I
now,
read a lot of
everybody
words
say
and can remember
bye.
some of them.
Okay.
Bye.
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 Bye, everyone. Thank you.